Hello and welcome to today's daily news analysis. So today is 28th of March 2022. We are covering the Hindu newspapers Delhi edition. And as part of our initiative, I make it a point to share questions for mains answer writing practice, and you can get your answers evaluated for free, 2 answers every week. Now the questions are there in the headlines. I mark it, right? So we have 2 questions today. So one is on the statement of Mr. Nitin Gadkari. It is about the relevance of the opposition in a democracy. So this is one question that I have. This is important for GS2. And the last topic, that is India's space economy valued at this thing. I'm not really concerned about where it is valued. We are concerned about what do you understand by the meaning of space economy. It's very vague, right? So define the space economy, and what measures are the government taking to promote space economy. So I have referred to the PIB, so you must visit, and what are the suggestions that the government has made. So you must read this, right? So the article was unlocking space economy to Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay, so this answers you can share on the WhatsApp or on the Telegram. The details are there in the description box below. Now coming to the first article, ahead of no trust vote, Imran says no deal with opposition. So basically, Pakistan's Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan. So, Pakistan's economy is in a very bad state. All economies are actually because of the pandemic, but theirs are particularly in a bad state. So they are like Sri Lanka, they are on the verge of bankruptcy. They are asking for money from the IMF, from US, from China, you name it. So it's a very, very bad situation. And when such things happen, it would always be leading to inflation also. High inflation, current account deficit, right? All those things. So the opposition members, the people against this political party in their parliament, have blamed the government. Naturally, they are the government and things are bad during their watch. So they have pushed for a no confidence motion. That is, if they pass this resolution, Imran Khan would have to tender his resignation. Now, it's a news about Pakistan, but yes, one thing about this is it may influence India's internal relations. Instability in Pakistan moving more towards China. China's surplus money and China provides money. So Pakistan is also known as the paid assassin of China. And other thing is that Imran Khan is said to be very, very close to the military of Pakistan. And the military of Pakistan obviously don't want good relations with India, it seems. So the tensions, it was believed that with Imran Khan coming, militancy conflicts with India will increase. Right. So this is the situation over here. So this is why we are a bit concerned because of this. Now, Russia's foreign minister to visit Delhi this week. Now, obviously, Russia's foreign minister is coming to Delhi, and why would he come? He would want India's support on the Ukraine issue, right? Russia is facing sanctions. Now, since Russia is facing sanctions, Russia would want an economic opening. And since India has been not India didn't vote in favor of Russia, but India didn't vote against also. So India abstained from voting at the UNSC, UNGA, etc. So it hopes that with reference to the sanctions also, and given that India has good defense ties, very, very important for India, that India may look to have alternate means of trade with Russia, particularly with reference to oil. Oil is becoming very, very expensive. The crude prices in the world is increasing. And likewise for India also, it is becoming very, very expensive when you go to the pump. And it is a significant source of revenue for the government also. And the fuel is heavily taxed. And if the taxation is reduced to give relief to the consumers because of the oil prices, then in that case, the fiscal deficit will increase. So it is not good for India's macroeconomic stability. And Russia has offered oil at discounted rate. Right. So oil. And other thing is that we have deals of S-400 missiles. surface to area missiles. We wanted to have it on the borders, especially against China. So S-400, and this was there in the news, that is AK-203 assault rifles. So this rifle will be built by the Indians, and the technology will be transferred to us by the Russians. And we also have military spares, military equipments like Sukhoi's existing planes. They need to be serviced on existing military equipments. So the spare parts, etc., will come from Russia. So we don't have much of an option over here, but we may have to look at an alternative as to how do we trade with Russia. But the problem is that Russia is under sanction, although oil sector is still not under the sanction thing. So in this regard, because of the sanction, one thing is obviously US will not like this. Other thing is that the access to dollar, the world trade takes place in dollar, but access to dollar is not available with Russia. So how does India buy things from Russia, or the export import takes place between the two countries? So they are looking at a possibility that we may have a currency swap agreement where the trade takes place via rupee and ruble currencies. That is the currency of India and currency of Russia. Right, so this is what they are looking at. Furthermore, you should know about the SWIFT also. So SWIFT is basically a mechanism where by which we have international bank transfers. Right, read about SWIFT. And money is not actually transferred, it is basically a messaging system. You have a query, you put it on the comment section, I'll get back to you. Okay, there is a Bharat Band, not much for our relevance for UPSC, but yes, Bharat Band is taking place by this organization known as Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, which is affiliated to the RSS organization. Right, it is affiliated to the RSS. Just a second. Right. So it is affiliated to RSS over here. So be watchful as to when you're going out, just be a bit careful. And this is about the things of the economy, that is the privatization of various sectors, banks, etc. Then high fuel prices. Then the government taking steps like reduction in the interest rate on the Provident Fund. Right, all those things they are complaining. So it's basically the labor wing of the RSS. Now coming to the question over here. A strong opposition is sine qua non for democracy. That is, it is a precondition. It is precondition. Without this, democracy cannot be there. So the statement was given by Mr. Gadkari in the parliament, maybe out of context statement, where he said that the strong Congress is essential for India. And it is a precondition. Strong opposition was the sine qua non for democracy. It's the same statement over here. And it says that since the Congress has weakened, so the space would be filled up by the regional parties, which we see actually in Uttar Pradesh, Congress is not there. So we have the Samajwadi Party. So the election was between Samajwadi Party and the BJP. In the West Bengal, it was TMC and the BJP. Right, so the regional parties are becoming more important. Now this is again GS2 trends in Indian politics, trends in the party system. So that is that is also one theme over here, which I have actually discussed multiple times. So now coming to this democracy component, a strong opposition is a sine qua non for democracy. So discuss with examples and please with India's context. Right. Okay. So democracy, first of all, it is not just that we give our votes. We give our votes and we give our votes to a particular party and the elections take place basically. And that is not just democracy. Democracy is much more than that. So establish the system. Democracy is also about participation of the people. Citizens of diverse groups exercising their opinions about the government. And democracy, again, one more thing you can add to this is, one is political democracy and other is socio-economic democracy. So political democracy is elections, you having fundamental rights to criticize, express your opinions, etc. Socio-economic democracy is basically having equality, having a say in social matters, having inclusivity, right? So in social sphere and economic sphere. Economic democracy here in this case would mean that uh, equal participation in the workforce, equal participation in the economy, decrease in the income inequality, right? So all those aspects over here. Freedom to conduct one's own business, all of that. Okay, now I'm right. So this is just one perspective on the democracy thing. But for a democracy to exist, and for democracy, for exercise of one's views and exercise of the purpose of the democracy over here, the opposition parties plays a very important role. First of all, in a parliamentary system, we have in the parliamentary system, obviously we have the majority party that rules, right? So let's imagine this is the BJP in the Lok Sabha, and we have the minorities, Congress, etc. So the BJP will form the executive. Since they are in the majority, they will form the government, and they have the support all the time. So the opposition over here, what will they do? They will try to hold the government accountable. They will try to keep the government under check. So they help maintain the system of checks and balances. It keeps the government in check as well as the legislature in check from becoming autocratic. Right? It is not that if they have been able to form the government, they can do whatever they want. So they will be held accountable. They will be criticized for their acts of whatever omissions they have done. Then the greater participation of the opposition over here would also mean that we have a multi-stakeholder view. That is, those people who voted, so their views are taken into consideration. But what about the views of the others? Right. So if the opposition is more vocal, opposition is active, so the views of the other sections of the population will also be taken into account, and that is very, very important. And by the way, in our context also, in our democracy also, like let's say BJP has 50+% of seats over here, but that doesn't mean that 50% of the population voted for them. It will be at best 36%, 37%. And prior to this, whosoever formed the government, they basically got more than 20% of the vote share. So rest 80%, or in the best case scenario also, about 65%, 63% haven't voted for this party. So their views also have to be taken into consideration, and they're a very big number. Okay, now when they raise issues, they are also mobilizing opinion. So it helps mobilize opinion against the government for whatever wrong, for whatever things that they have missed. So they will hold them accountable. For example, the finance minister said that our fiscal deficit is at 6.9%, it will be at 6.4%. So these targets are basically given by the government selling things. So the Congress ministers were, the ex-ministers of the Congress were holding the government that you cannot claim this. You're claiming that the GST will increase by twice the number. How can that be? It is not possible. 2 times. Right? You cannot be, the GDP is doubling, then you can expect, okay, fine, the GST will also double, but that is improbable. So it is holding the government accountable. What about the Pegasus issue? Pegasus spyware. So it is mobilizing an opinion against the government and the party in power. Kerala nurseries bounce back on northeast rubber wave. Fine. So basically, the government wants to promote the cultivation of rubber plantations in the northeast. So Kerala has equatorial type of climate. Basically, I want to focus on the cropping, the cropping environment for rubber, cropping pattern for rubber, what all conditions are required. So high temperature, 27 degrees Celsius, equatorial, good amount of rainfall, so huge amount of water is required. Right, so these conditions are very, very important. So Kerala, Western Ghats provide that. So likewise in the northeast also it is possible. So northeast we want to have more cultivation of rubber. Now where will the rubber come? from a place where the cultivation is already taking place. So it will come from Kerala in this case. So because of the demand for rubber in Northeast, right, rubber is not being cultivated as yet, or not at that scale. So they want the plants, they want the crops from Kerala. So from Kerala they will be planted into Northeast. So the nurseries are the place where the plants are first grown and then they are planted on the field. Right? Therefore, there is a demand for the crops in the Kottayam area, the Kerala area. Okay, so you get the rubber conditions for cropping for prelims. Now all of this is being done, it's being regulated. The rubber sector in India is being regulated by the Rubber Board, which is a statutory body. It is created by the statute of the parliament known as Rubber Act 1947, and it is not headquartered in Delhi, but it is headquartered in Kottayam, Kerala. Okay, right, so this is it. Now imagine if more of it says that 51 lakh hectares, so huge amount of land, 51 lakh saplings would be planted. So in that case, obviously the existing forest, existing trees, etc. would be removed and then they will be planted. Rubber plantation will take place. So naturally, when you are planting a single crop, you are affecting the biodiversity of that place. So rubber plantation will come at the cost of biodiversity. So this is one more issue that can be considered. So this is a scene of a rubber. This is a rubber tree. This person is making a cut over here, and the rubber will drip into the containers that he has. Now, Mondays we have articles on education sector, particularly this pedagogy. Pedagogy is to do with how the teaching is to be done. So here we had certain interesting perspectives. So one expression that was used by the UNESCO was that we experience the scenario of poverty of imagination. And even it's not just with the children, even I feel so when I'm taking class. So when I'm seeing the offline classes, I notice this poverty of imagination, not able to imagine what is happening. And one more thing that is being referred to is, and when we refer to imagination, imagining the future, right? So future literacy, and future has to be imagined only as to what all is going to happen in the future, right? So future literacy, and like many other skills like reading, writing, right? Reading, writing, speaking, etc. We talk about this literacy, arithmetic literacy also. Future literacy should also be considered in the education system. So future literacy. So this is something that we need to work on. Now, UPSC may ask you a standalone question, may ask you in GS1 section about the expression of poverty of imagination and as to what can be done, or it can ask you about the future literacy also. So future literacy is basically you having the skill to imagine as to what will be there in the future, right? So it's basically about that. So it is about futurists do not make predictions but create readiness and imagine alternate futures. Now you may consider this, that businesses, for example, when you post an idea, you imagine, okay, fine, you estimate that my sales are going to go this much, this product is going to have a demand, so we have to work on this, right? So in businesses it is done, and you're not, by saying you're not just predicting it, it's just that you're creating an estimate over here. Likewise, the government does it for policy making aspects. So for policy making, and for all of this you need data, right? So data is taken, calculated, then it is interpreted as to, okay, fine, these are the trends, and in the future we will have such and such trends over here. Or it could be with reference to new ideas. I think the Facebook is coming out with this concept of metaverse, where virtually we are present in different places. So that is again an imagination of the what stands in the future. Okay, so future thing over here. Now when we look at the future thing, the existing system of education is not adequate. The existing system of education, as you see, we study history, we study geography. So either we study about the present or what has happened in the past. So our education system is centered towards is backward looking. We need to be also focusing on as to what is going to happen. We have to inculcate the foresight. And for that, we need alternative learning pathways. Right? We have to find alternative learning pathways, alternative systems of learning. We need to discard passivity. Passivity is when you're reading basically whatever you're getting to you. In fact, this news analysis is a very good example of passive learning. But when you do the question answers, it's kind of an active this thing, because when that is the time when you're thinking and trying to work on those issues. So discards passivity, gives confidence in collective co-creative learning. Children working together, or you're brainstorming with other people, so co-creative learning. Setting aside careerism and ideological baggage, right? We need to look beyond all of this over here. Now, when we look at future over here, there are two things. One is what all things are going to take place. We're going to have future like A, B, C, D, right? For example, with reference to climate change, may have this scenario. So different options could be there. Or it could be about what do we prefer. Okay, fine, tomorrow we want by 2070 we want to be carbon neutral. That is our vision. So that is preferred future. So one is the various options and other is the preferred futures. So the scientists say that the brain is not conditioned to look as to what is going to happen, but it is conditioned, or it is wired in such a way that we look at what all happened in the past. So when we look at the future, we basically look at various hypotheses. We pose various questions and try to address those scenarios. Okay, fine. If this happens, then what will happen? If this happens, then what will happen? Like that. Right, so this is it. Do look into it. So this is what I want, just a basic idea I wanted to give you over here. Poverty rose, but income inequality fell. So this article is all about statistics actually. It's a statistics, but it gives us certain facts based on which we see UPSC tends to ask us trend-based questions. Right, it is focusing upon that. So we are looking at the trends over here. Okay, so what it's saying is, first of all, the economy has been in a very bad shape, particularly because of the COVID-19, and because of this the extreme poverty has increased. And for extreme poverty, it is giving an indication of is using the definition of the World Bank. And how does World Bank define poverty, extreme poverty? It says globally, if a person is earning less than $1.9 a day, then a person is having extreme poverty. And this figure is quite liberal if we consider the parameters that Indian economy considers. So it says that the extreme poverty has increased from 7.6% in November 2019 to 11.7%. Now these are things that you can use in your answer writing. Okay. So one is this, right? So extreme poverty has increased. The other thing it is saying is, what it has interestingly seen is that normally we see is that when something happens, when a disaster happens or anything, the poorer sections, because they have less resources, they are more vulnerable. So the loss of income to the poorer section is much more as compared to the well-off. So imagine this is the income of the rich and this is the poor. So typically the poorer suffers much more than the rich. But what we have seen with reference to the COVID-19 pandemic is that poverty has increased. So if this was there, poverty has increased overall, extreme poverty, but the income levels of the rich has come down to a greater extent to the fall in the income of the poorer sections, or the people who were earning less income, right? So that is what this article is basically saying. So it has used various parameters and tried to assess it. So it has used three parameters of household income, and before this household income there is this parameter over here. There is one index known as Consumer Pyramids Household Survey. So this Consumer Pyramids Household Survey is telling about the status of the household, right? So most of the fact we are getting over here. So it is not by the government, it is not by the NSO, but it is by a private agency known as CMIE. It basically looks into the parameters of the economy, employment, etc. Okay, right. So we see that the richer households saw larger drops in income all along in the income scale. So their income decreased. So that is why the income inequality has come down. It is not like how we want. We want, okay, fine, this is the income of the rich, this is the income of the poor. If we want to bridge the income inequality, we want the poorer to get well off, not the rich to come down. Right, so this is what has happened over here, and it is believed that once the thing normalizes, then again the income inequality will come to the pre-pandemic level. Now it has referred to three sources of income over here to assess, and this is something that you must consider. So one is for the poor people, for anybody actually, the government transfers. That is money coming from coming to the people from the government. The other is income from businesses, and the third one is labor income, right? Income that is coming from either wages or as employment or employment contracts. So labor wages. So in this it has found, in the case of business section, so the income of the rich has fallen by a greater degree as compared to the wage loss of the wages are obviously given to the worker people, right? So as compared to them, and so it has decreased. Theirs also has decreased, but there has decreased by a greater margin, right? So this is there. And even when we look at the labor thing, so people who are paid more, the well-off, and the people who are poorer. So the people who were paid higher before the pre-pandemic level, their fall in income was much more, because the demand for what they were offering was not required. It's not so essential as compared to the physical work or the labor work that they provide. So that demand was still there in some ways, right? So even here it says that the manufacturing, all the other economy sectors have declined, but manufacturing has declined by a lesser margin. So manufacturing declined less than 20% during the pandemic. And we have one more fact about the government transfers. So you know, okay, fine, government provides income, right? So government transfers for urban, it was around roughly rupees 400 per month for an household, and for rural India it was rupees 500 per month, right? This is it. And income inequality thing, it is not, now government transfer would normally take place toward the poorer people. They will be provided more they should be provided more subsidies, Atal Pension Yojana, and so many other things are there. But the income inequality was more because the bridge was not because the people of the poorer section were paid more. It was actually the rich lost more income. So this is the article about. Now US cuts a deal. The US cuts a deal with the European Union vis-a-vis LNG. So read this. Russia was providing natural gas, oil, etc. to the European Union. We also have studied about the Nord Stream, right? We studied about the Nord Stream. Nord Stream 2 was going on. Okay. So sanctions have been imposed, but still not on the oil. And EU is heavily dependent on natural gas and oil that is coming from Russia. So it says about 40% dependence is there. And for some countries, it is more than 80%. Like Germany, it is more than 80%. So naturally, when US wants to impose sanction on Russia, it will have an adverse impact on the economy of the European countries. So to pressurize Russia and to reduce the trade of oil that is coming from Russia, US has offered a deal to the European Union. And now they cannot have normal pipelines. So natural gas is normally transferred via the pipelines like the GAIL, Indraprastha Gas, all these companies. But US is far away, right? It's across the Atlantic. So they will provide them liquefied gas, like the cylinders that you get, right? LPG, liquefied petroleum, liquefied natural gas will be given to reduce the dependence of EU on Russia. Clear? Okay. Now, naturally, since it is coming from a far off distance, it is liquefied as compared to natural gas. This will be more expensive. And the immediate, in the very near future, it is not possible that this gas will be able to bridge the 40% is a significant amount for a continent. US will not be able to fill up for Russia over here, right? It's simply not possible. Plus lot of infrastructure is required for all of this. So in the short term, not much is going to take place, but yes, it is a significant development. And maybe, this article doesn't say, but maybe it is possible that we may have a sanction on the oil or the energy exports coming from Russia. And one more thing over here, that European Union, normally European Union would say that, see, this is energy, it's natural gas, right? It's polluting, it pollutes the environment, and it pollutes the environment, it is causing global warming. So in this case, the European Union, this is a separate thing from here. European Union has said that energy coming from gas is green energy. So it seems that the European Union has compromised on its commitment on climate change goals. Now this is important. India's space economy valued at rupees 36,794 crores. Who says so? And it says that it is 0.23% of the GDP. Who says? Some two prominent institutions. So one is the Center for Development Studies and the Indian Institute of Science and Technology. Does it concern us? Not really. We get a theme about space economy. I have the government's figures over here, and the government says that the global space economy is at US dollars 360 billion, and India's share is about 2%. And I am biased towards the government's view. I may consider this fact as more honest, more true, but I will use this for the examination if I had to. Right. So now comes the question. The article says that the space economy, the contours of which have remained largely vague. So it's not very clear as to what is space economy. So here is the question. Explain the term space economy by referring to suitable examples with context to India. State the suggested measures to be taken to promote India's space economy. Right, so basically we are looking at space from economic perspective, application of space maybe. And in this reference, what all activities would the ISRO do? We have space probes. Space probes are like Chandrayaan 2, Mangalyaan, these are space probes. Then space could be used for governance. In fact, our Prime Minister is said to have remarked that the space sector can be used to bridge the governance gap between the government and particularly the less privileged. Governance. Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and Starlink. So Starlink is a constellation of satellites which will provide high cost, it's high cost actually, but yes, high speed internet. But yes, in future we may have internet, and we can also have telecommunications. We can also have direct to home. We had direct to home. Nowadays it is all that geo internet, right? And from that we are watching the TV. So direct to home services. How about the navigation services? Navigation services like IRNSS. Right, so navigation services. Business coming from launch. We are become very good at launching satellites at a very low cost. So launch business, launching satellites of US launching satellites of Canada, right, and other countries. So launch vehicles, launching of satellites for other countries and for private sector for whatever needs they have. So all of this have a economic significance also, all of these activities. So this is basically the space economy. Now space probes also, you may say that the private vendors are being deployed over here, private vendors, and they are working on this, so some sort of employment is also getting created. Governance, right? So governance, economy, they go together. It's all of this. Navigation, the ISRO can monetize this and sell it to the private sector, the data that it is collecting and the services that it is providing. So here we have that it is around 2%. Now read this line. There should be no space between common man and space technology, right? So space should be accessible. The benefits of the space technology should be available to everybody, and it should benefit the common man. That is it. Okay. Now one thing that we notice these days is that private sector is no longer playing an enabling role. Enabling role means that ISRO is making the satellite, and ISRO says, okay, fine, or NASA says, okay, fine, you give me this thing, you make this plastic for me, you make this ceramic for me, whatever. So it is no longer a vendor. Nowadays, we are seeing the private sector as the main players, right? So main players who are contributing to the space sector. So in US in particular, NASA is playing a very big role here. So SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, Arianespace, so these companies have emerged and they are launching their own satellites. They all have their own launch vehicles. In India, we still use them as vendors, but they are having their own space programs now. So we are being limited to being vendors or suppliers to the government space programs. So we need to transition. We also need to work on this component over here. So space technologies can create jobs and it can revolutionize the delivery of governance services and boost development efforts. Now what can be done? So first of all, ISRO has its own marketing arm, also known as Antriksh, right? It is having its own marketing arm and where it seeks business from others. So that is there. Other thing it can do is, naturally ISRO has its limitations, so we must look at having greater involvement of the private sector. That is almost a precondition for promoting the space sector. And for this it says, for the space sector and maybe the private sector, ISRO is government, so government is very, very static. Okay, fine, we want this, we want to do this, that. But private sector will be having this entrepreneurial spirit and look to address the gaps that are available there in the market, or they will look to address the niche in the market. So they will be more innovative and look at more opportunities in the space sector. So it should be open to the private sector, and ISRO should play an enabling role of promoting the private sector in space. So here are certain developments, certain suggestions that have been made, and as part of the same PIB over here. So first it says that enable and promote private enterprises to carry out independent space activities, not as a vendor. And this can be done by enabling ease of business. Other is open up ISRO infrastructure technologies. Whatever this is there, it should be share it with the private sector, and this includes testing, tracking, telemetry, etc. Then we also need manpower. So specifically our science committee, children, so we need to encourage them to pursue a career in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, make them aware of the opportunities in the space sector. Now one more thing it says is that research and development is a very resource intensive, so this can be done by the government, and this could be shared to the private sector, right? So private sector can look to monetize this. Then previously developed and already mature technologies can be transferred to the private sector. For example, the satellite, the technology of the PSLV can be shared to the private sector. Likewise, for the GSLV, we made our own GSLV rocket. In fact, this is a GSAT satellite, right? So GSAT, if it has to be launched, it's basically geostationary satellite. So it will be at 36,000 kilometers from the Earth. So heavy satellite is required for this. GSLV is used. The government needs to emphasize not on supply driven approach like ISRO has supply. Okay, it has developed IRNSS, right? It has developed weather this thing, so it has supply, so it is providing it. Now it should be what the people need or what would be the need in the market. So according to that, the things should be developed. Then there should be creation of new assets to be more contingent on confirmation of. It's basically continuation of this point only. Right then, so this basically concludes the session. So thank you for streaming in to IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. Bye bye, take care, and all the best.